Welcome back, Paolo, your host, and this is Conversations in Artificial Intelligence. Today, we're going to go through a very interesting episode where you're going to learn how artificial intelligence is used in the race of Indianapolis. You're going to learn how you build differentiated products with artificial intelligence. And finally, you're going to also see how artificial intelligence is evolving in the near future and how the companies can tap into more resources, more features and functionalities as the market is evolving. With us today, we have Alex Castrounis, who is a product and analytics consultant and engineers and data scientist by education, and a veteran of artificial intelligence and analytics. He has more than 20 years in the field. He's a book author and the author of the book AI for People and Businesses. Hi, Alex. How are you today?
I'm good, Paolo. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
When I start reading your book, I think you can also show the book just for a second to our audience. So one of the things that attracted my attention is that you started your career in data science, working for racing companies, and you're working in the Indianapolis race. How is AI impacting that field?
As a kid, when I was 16 years old, I was a junior in high school to the Indianapolis 500 for the first time, and it turned out to be the closest Indy 500 race in history. And I was so blown away by it that I walked out of the speedway that day telling everybody that I was with that I was going to do that for a living. And I really was so fascinated by how fast the cars went, but also the fact that there was so much, technology, innovation required, right, in engineering to make, really put on this spectacle. So I had decided that I was going to do that for a living, and I was super interested in, analytics, data, mathematics, statistics, and so forth. So long story short, wind up doing my master's in applied mathematics, and then wound up working in racing, and finally got my foot in the door as a race car engineer and a race strategist. And it's really fascinating because each of these cars has something like 80 plus sensors on them. It's really like IoT on steroids before anyone was talking about IoT. So, you have pressure sensors, laser sensors, temperature sensors, motion sensors, angle sensors, and you name it, it goes on and on. And so every time the car is on track going around, you're collecting tons and tons of data, and you usually have very short periods of time to optimize the race car setup and work with the driver and look at the data in order to go as fast as you possibly can. And you're trying to optimize the race car for all these different tracks. You have like your short ovals, your super speedways, your road courses, your street courses, and then you have like weather conditions and track surface conditions and different drivers, and it becomes quite a huge challenge in terms of all the things you can tweak on the car as well to make the car faster. So it's really quite interesting. And so you find yourself having little option other than to start looking at techniques associated with machine learning and artificial intelligence in order to optimize the race car as quickly as you can, because you're really limited on time. You need very deep insights quickly, and you need insights across a huge combination or permutation of different variables and parameters, because on the car itself, you can tweak so many different things that it's like big data, but in racing. So it's very similar. And so a lot of the applications are predicting the race car balance and also predicting things relevant to race strategy, like when do you pit, how much fuel should you take, what are your competitors going to do during the race, and so on and so forth.
So did your team end up winning any race because of your big data calculations?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely, winning any races is a team effort. So I'm not going to take full credit for the race wins I've been a part of by any means. But yes, I have definitely won races with my teams, a lot of podium finishes. One of the milestones for me was I was on the winning team of the final Champ Car race in history, which was kind of a big deal after a large split in the IndyCar series that lasted about 16 years.
So you just released this book, AI for People and Businesses. What does set the book apart?
Yeah, I mean, I think the book is very unique. I don't think there's much out there or anything really like it. There's a lot of content out there on AI right now, but a lot of it is very practitioner level. There's plenty of, tutorials about TensorFlow, and, there's just so much out there geared heavily towards, machine learning engineers and data scientists. And I find that a lot of executives and managers, also product managers, still really struggle to understand sort of what AI is, what machine learning is, what are the benefits, how can it be used or leveraged within an organization, and so on, and really struggle specifically with even developing a vision and strategy around artificial intelligence. So the goal of the book, as you said, it is geared towards executives, managers, and anyone interested in leveraging AI. But it's also good for practitioners too, because sometimes, taking more of that business perspective, sort of that bigger picture view, and sort of looking at the benefits and the value and potential impact that AI can have is really important. But the reason it's called AI for People in Business is it's really not only about benefits of AI, but it's also about benefits specifically for people in addition to business. And the subtitle, Framework for Better Human Experiences and Business Success, I think, when you're talking about what are the benefits of AI for business, those things tend to be a little more obvious. Top level business goals usually involve things like increased profits or growth, or increased customer acquisition, retention, and growth, things like that. But it's not as clear sometimes what are the benefits for people when you're using AI and machine learning. And so I really wanted to focus on that, and specifically how AI can have impact on people's experiences. The other thing is I developed a framework as well, sort of an end-to-end framework on how to, sort of create successful AI solutions and, execute AI initiatives from beginning to end. But the book focuses heavily on the vision and strategy component, given the target audience of executives and managers. And I think that's one of the areas that people struggle with most. So there's a lot going on there to be successful with AI. And so I'm really trying to help people understand how that works and how to be successful.
So how do managers struggle with understanding AI, and how does your book help specifically with that struggle?
I find that the granularity is difficult for people to get right. And what I mean by that is, when you're talking to certain executives, they actually often really don't care about specific deep learning techniques or what reinforcement learning is or this or that, right? And so a lot of the material out there and the content out there kind of gets a little too granular, a little too in the weeds in terms of the technical side. On the other hand, you can go the opposite way and be a little too high level. So I think helping people understand the benefits of AI and how they can use it, there's this sort of medium happy balance that I try to focus on and really tune the book for. So the understanding is really, what is AI? A lot of people don't still understand what AI is. There's so much marketing hype around AI. And so some people still think of it as more like these robots, killer robots, or, it's something that's going to take a lot of jobs. But it's not very clear what AI really is and all the different ways you can use it and the different sorts of outcomes.
What it takes to drive market differentiation with AI?
AI is definitely capable of driving differentiation. And in my racing career, a great example of competitive advantage is, you're able to out-engineer the other teams, let's say, or you have a better strategy, or you have better ways of leveraging your data to get deeper insights so that you can win races. So sort of the goal there is to win. In the business side, the same thing can be said. Competitive advantage, one thing I think could definitely be a competitive advantage is data itself. Data could be a core advantage for businesses if and only if they know how to use it. And I think, part of AI is it's not only having data that others don't have, but it's also being able to use your data in ways that others can't. And I think AI and machine learning techniques, depending on what areas of those fields you're leveraging, it certainly can give you a competitive advantage in that you can use your data in ways that your competitors can't. And you can create certain benefits and outcomes that your competitors can't as well.
How can we identify a few examples, maybe also example you have discussed it in your book, that can help illustrate how artificial intelligence drives effective product differentiations or service differentiations in the marketplace?
I agree. So AI has been largely academic and theoretical for a long time. And I think we're starting to see many more real world applications and use cases and companies leveraging it. AI successfully. Some areas are healthcare and medicine, things like that. Some of the really interesting areas right now, there's people trying to use computer vision combined with certain hardware to help blind people see. So I think any application of artificial intelligence that could help people with disabilities is really interesting. There's a lot going on right now as well with non-invasive disease detection, things like retinal scans to detect cardiovascular disease, even things around detecting skin cancer problems using computer vision, pattern recognition, and so forth. There's also some really interesting things going on with optimizing medication dosing. When you look at how AI is being applied for personalization, so recommendations are the classic example, like the Amazon, Netflix recommendations. But in general, people like things to be personalized to them to some extent. They don't, normally if you just send a bunch of content out to people, for example, or products that's just sort of geared towards the average of the masses, people won't identify unless they're right there with that average of the masses for that specific product or content or whatever. Likewise, with medication, a lot of times people will prescribe some amount of medication, but that dosing is also sort of an average in a similar analogous way to what I was saying with the recommendations. But everybody's body chemistry is different and everybody reacts differently to medication. So there's a lot of work going on right now as well, using certain techniques like deep reinforcement learning to try and optimize that kind of dosing on a more individualized, personalized basis. And then there's also really interesting applications for things like suicide prevention as well, which, all of these are ways that people are looking at using AI to benefit people in terms of their health outcomes and even potentially saving lives.
Let's say somebody who is the CEO of a medium-sized business in the Midwest is making $200 million maybe. So there's somebody, it's a company, it's a middle company, they're not super high tech, but they are very established. And as the CEO of this company, I'm asking myself, well, everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, it drives competitive advantage. What do I do? So how can we help the kind of person or the kind of company to actually participate in the AI ecosystem, taking advantage from doing that?
So my book is meant for those exact types of executives that are interested in what can they do, how do they do it, how do they think about it. I created that framework, as I mentioned. It's called the AI for People in Business framework. So the book also goes into quite a bit of depth about that. And it's all about, there's a bunch of other models that I've created that help these executives understand what they need to do. Because, really becoming sort of a data-driven or heavily data-informed organization does require a lot of change depending on sort of how the organization is today with data. And usually you get into these concepts of scientific innovation, which I talk a lot about in the book. There's a whole chapter on that. There's also, how ready are you for AI? So there's a model around AI readiness I created. There's also concepts around what's your maturity level. And there's a few different models around maturity that I've created in my book as well to help them understand sort of where are they at, where do they need to be, what does the plan or roadmap look like to get to where they need to be, and so on. And part of that also is that there's definitely a mind shift that needs to be adopted and sort of a cultural change as well when you're starting to get into more this, what I call scientific innovation techniques like AI. And it's very like an analogy that I give is, the big transition that happened from waterfall to agile. A lot of companies looked at waterfall. There were a lot of issues. Things weren't getting delivered, or they were after huge amounts of time and cost. And then just to find out that the market doesn't even need what they spent all that time and money building. And so, that led to this whole new agile movement. And agile tries to solve a lot of those problems by delivering value quicker and so forth. But in order to leverage agile, it really required not only a complete mind shift and cultural change, but actually changes in processes and the way that you build products and get teams together and coordinate and all your processes and so on. And so one of the reasons that AI still, I think, isn't adopted, at the level it probably should be, or that companies that try to leverage AI might not succeed in certain initiatives, is due to these things that, AI is very different than building, your traditional sort of more deterministic type products like a mobile app, right? That isn't based on all the underlying, probabilities and statistics and non-deterministic aspects of trying to build models with data and so forth.
Typically, here is the thing. If I'm not doing something in life and I want to do something new, we start talking about what is required to do something new, people give up. Like if they have to go to the gym for the first time and you say you're going to sweat like crazy and you have to work 10 times a day, they're not going to do it. If you say you're going to get 6 packs in 6 weeks and all the ladies will cheer at you, they're going to do it. Going back to our Midwest middleware manufacturer that is producing, that does a $200 million revenue, has a stable revenue, where is the value that they typically extract from going into artificial intelligence?
I have a whole chapter where I talk about typical goals for both people and then a set of goals for business. And in the goals for business, there are a lot of things around, maybe you're trying to create a new market or expand your existing market, or maybe you're trying to achieve certain top level goals. So in the case of a manufacturing company, maybe they're trying to optimize their supply chain. And so they're looking at AI for different ways to optimize the supply chain and save costs there. There's people using AI for predictive maintenance, for example. If they can predict when to maintain certain vehicles rather than just do it based on an arbitrary number of miles or an arbitrary amount of time, then they can reduce, they can schedule the staff in their repair centers better. They can save money and time in other ways. So it really is looking at what are those goals, what are you trying to achieve? And then how do you identify the opportunities and the use cases? And I think this is one of the really challenging things with AI. It requires multiple people to get together to do that, right? So it's not just the machine learning engineer or the data scientist that's coming up with how do you leverage AI to achieve these business goals. You really need people with domain expertise. You need the business people as well, sort of the more MBA or whatever, the people that really understand the business, working closely together and with the more technical people to figure out where those opportunities lie. Because at the end of the day, there aren't just AI tools or platforms or software libraries that you could grab off the shelf that solve supply chain issues right off the shelf, right? You have to look at it and say, okay, well, I know that I can predict numbers with AI. I know I can predict categories. I know that I can rank things a certain way or score things. I know that I can turn text into objective analytics of some sort to get more of an objective understanding from text. So the trick really becomes, how do you turn what the outputs of these different AI techniques creates into the solution of an actual business problem that, to your point, a COO that has some sort of company is trying to solve? Because it won't just be some sort of off-the-shelf solution. You have to figure out which things you need to optimize, which kind of metrics you need to predict, or values, for example, and things like that.
I'm thinking also to, for example, a company that has a traditional business, established set of services, how that company can leverage AI to alter the business, really the service to their customer, the way that they provide service to their customers. Is there an example you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really, really amazing examples right now is the Amazon Go stores. They've been known largely for their e-commerce offering and also for, AWS. So they provide, sort of the whole cloud infrastructure as a service stuff. But then they've clearly made a shift to getting more into retail. So they bought Whole Foods and then they launched this new sort of set of stores, retail locations that are like convenience stores called Amazon Go. And essentially you walk in there, you scan an app, it opens a gate, you just walk in and you could grab whatever you want off the shelves. You could put it in your backpack, put things in your pocket, and they're using what they call sensor fusion, which is a combination of computer vision. I believe they have proximity sensors, and they also have other sensors like weight sensors on each of the shelves. And they're basically able to track on a per person basis what you're grabbing and sort of taking with you when you go. And then you just walk right out. There's no registers. There's no really dealing with anybody. You just grab what you want and walk right out. And I think going from sort of the online e-com primary business model to that, leveraging AI is a pretty huge shift. And I think it's the beginning of what we'll see to come, which is a lot more of that.
I was pretty attracted by some of the use cases that you described and discussed in terms of how people can benefit. So some of them are in the medical field. Maybe you can talk a little bit more at extent on examples like, the personalized dosing or the identifications of disease with higher precisions. Like, what benefit is really AI bringing into the table, and what it takes to create AI for those particular type of applications?
So if AI is able to help with earlier disease detection and treatment, then there's a very good chance that you'll have a better health outcome. So the clear benefit there is that you may have had a worse outcome had you not had some of these things. Like, people are using cardio echo scans and AI techniques to detect potential cardiovascular disease. There's work being done to detect lung cancer earlier as well from radiographic images, things like that. I'm sure you know about human augmented intelligence. So a lot of people are talking about that these days, and how rather than automate people's jobs entirely, it's with AI, it's using AI to actually augment people's jobs and help them do what they do best. And so, using the AI to do the tedious part of the task or whatever, so that the people can do more value add work, their time can be better spent, they can have a bit bigger impact at work and also more enjoyment and so on, and be more efficient. One interesting area is in intensive care units. Apparently, from what I've seen, there's a lot of work that needs to be done by people on a regular basis when someone's in intensive care, to monitor the different equipment, make sure everything's working, make sure the settings are all properly set and keep adjusting them and so on and so forth. And so there's people right now looking at how to leverage AI to sort of automate a lot of the monitoring and settings management for people in intensive care units, so that the practitioners, like the nurses and everybody else in these intensive care units, can actually spend more time working with the patients and being with the patients and tending to their more direct needs, because a lot of times they're also understaffed. So this also helps, optimize, given the number of staff you have, how many people you can tend to and help.
Often AI is associated to the reduction of job availability for human beings. But actually there is, I think, a more predominant trend, which is increasing the availability of processes that otherwise are not possible. We have seen this in things like checking the waste that otherwise human beings cannot do it. Now we're seeing it in the example you're mentioning in helping and assisting people that are in intensive care. So basically doing it with a much higher frequency and doing it with more granularity. And that often is not possible because there are not enough personnel. Where do you see really the future going with this trend?
AI, I think more and more companies are starting to leverage AI and starting to look at that. The World Economic Forum released a report, their 2018 Future of Jobs report, where they showed that more than likely many jobs will be sort of automated, but many new jobs will be created for a net gain of jobs rather than a net loss. And then there were many other sources as well that I came across that showed the same sort of research and kind of their predictions. Now, of course, that depends on many things, so time will tell. But I think that we are going to see things automated just like we have before AI. I think people tend to associate automation only with AI these days, but things were being automated well before AI was really even a thing. I mean, there were rules-based automation systems. Just writing software code in general automates things, right? There's many software applications being used in operations and other business capacities that automate things that aren't necessarily AI driven. That being said, we'll see. I think right now, much of the research shows that augmenting human intelligence is sort of the preference amongst most executives. And so I think that's where we're going to see some more impact in the field in the near term future.
So you have also been highly involved from a technology perspective into artificial intelligence. So what is in your opinion, the future holding right now? Like, where are we gonna be in a few years from now, in your opinion?
The really interesting advancements that are going on right now is in natural language understanding. There's sort of new benchmarks every day and new algorithms that are being sort of deployed that hit even better metrics on certain benchmark tasks in that area. I think we're going to see more speech dominance. People are talking to devices more and more like they do with their Alexas and their Google Homes and Siris and whatever else. But, I think we're going to see a lot more speech related applications over time. I think you touched on this a bit earlier, but this idea of auto ML, people do want to make machine learning and artificial intelligence more accessible to people and companies so that they can leverage it easier in an easier fashion and for lower costs. And so people are out there building platforms to help enable that. We should see more of that. And there are companies already doing that today. Although I still think there's quite a ways to go in those areas. So we'll see what the developments look like there. And then just in terms of hardware advancements as well, there's new chips coming out all the time that are optimized for these sort of massive AI training jobs, which can be both expensive and time consuming and prohibitive in the past for many companies. So I think as the computing resources and data handling resources get faster and cheaper to use, we'll see probably also a bit more proliferation of people leveraging AI as well.
So this is a certain exciting future I think we have in front of us with the technology that is becoming more and more pervasive in any sector of the economy. But in my personal experience, I found that a real huge and gigantic bottleneck connected to to your topic of AutoML is all the amount of operations that are necessary around gathering data and preparing data, and then also maintaining data for growing AI over time, because a lot of these applications, they're designed in a way such that the first day that they enter in operations, they have a certain performance, but over time, they become more and more intelligent. The problem is there's lots of data operations behind that. Where do you see that these things get simplified? Because today, the cost in terms of money, in terms of time, in terms of type of personnel that you need to have and number of people that you need to have, it's significant.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're seeing new roles that are being developed to address that. So you see this data engineering role, right? Before we had DevOps, now we have data ops and we have data engineers. They're the people that are building out these pipelines, to your point, of how do you get data from one place to another? Because normally, as you pointed out, data is a huge issue for a lot of companies. A lot of these techniques do require a lot of data, and they don't just require a lot of data, they require what I call the right data, and I talk about that a lot in the book, what constitutes the right data. But not only that, it comes from different places. So often it's not just the data from one place. So you have to integrate data, you have to ingest data, you have to get it somewhere that's optimized for your analytics. Then you have to do your model building and everything else like we discussed. And then deploy these solutions to production, monitor them, improve them over time, create your data feedback loops to optimize and improve and so on. I think, certain platforms right now are trying to simplify at least how you deploy these AI solutions. For example, AWS has their SageMaker. Google has a similar thing. I think Data Robot does this as well. But, now, it's becoming more service oriented, sort of like the trend that we've seen in software architectures, in the last, 5 to 10 years. So more and more people are trying to deploy AI models as services, as like HTTP endpoints, for example, RESTful endpoints that other applications can leverage. And so these platforms try to automate that or make it a lot more simple to kind of tune a model, optimize the model, deploy the model, and then update the model as needed pretty quickly. So there's things being done there to try and minimize the amount of people, the amount of expense, the amount of time, the amount of effort, and the amount of steps required to maintain that pipeline and sort of keep it running and improving as you go.
The cost has been a barrier to entry for AI to be applied, not in consumer products from Google and Amazon, but I mean from the everyday company. But another barrier that I see is the education of personnel. And of course, people think about technical education. There's a lot out there. But do you believe that only the technical people needs to be educated in AI? Or you think that there is something that needs to be done at other levels, and what specifically needs to be done?
There's a ton of stuff out there for technical people. I don't think there's any shortage right now of ways to learn, whether it's in articles or books or online courses or you name it, for technical people to learn about AI and machine learning at this point, or how to leverage it. I think there is a huge gap. So to answer your question, yes, there's a huge gap. And that's been kind of where I focused for many years now, starting with a blog I started about 5-6 years ago. I find that there's just not as much content geared towards executives and managers around these fields. But not only that, I read an article not long ago, I think it was the Harvard Business Review, and they talked about this new role they were calling an analytics translator. So it's sort of like the business analyst type role, but for, people that are translating between the business and the technical side of AI and machine learning. There's education around that as well. And I think, look, I was largely motivated to write this book to help people understand and help educate at the right level. Because again, going back to what I said at the beginning, there's a granularity mismatch as well. And I think there's sort of an in-between level that's necessary, that's not too technical and it's not too high level. And so, I haven't seen a lot out there that sort of sits in that kind of sweet spot that I've been going for. But I think there does need to be more education around AI and machine learning for executives, for managers, for product managers that are building products. More and more products are going to become more data centric and analytics centric over time and start leveraging recommendation engines and personalization and text analytics through NLP type applications and so on. And in order for product people to understand what even the opportunities are, what potential things they can incorporate in their products, they need to learn more about it. And so I think you're even seeing a whole new field called data product management and new roles called data product managers. So now it's not just being a traditional product manager or even a technical product manager, which is also a job role title. Now you're seeing data product managers. And in order to get more of those, it's going to have to come through education. And it's going to have to come through education that is properly tailored to that role and to the more managerial type person as opposed to the tactician or the practitioner. So yes, and that's certainly my focus and something I've been doing for a long time. I teach courses as well. I wrote the book. So I'm definitely one of many people out there that are trying to help those people understand these things.
So with that, we have come to the conclusion of this episode. Thank you so much for attending this to all our audience. If you have questions, just comment below if you see this on YouTube or on LinkedIn or on Facebook. So we interviewed today Alex Castrounis, who is the author of AI for People and Business. It's an interesting book that you can check it out. Right now it's available on Amazon and it's available for purchase. And Alex, thank you so much for having you here. It was a great pleasure, and good luck with your consulting practice and also with your book.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor and I really appreciate it. And good luck with everything that you do as well.